Reflection for Teaching, Knowledge of Learners and Learning section of ePortfolio. When I was a student, a school librarian was the nice lady I saw once a week who read stories and helped students check out books. Today, and as a future school librarian, I understand that a librarian should be a partner in learning. I selected these two artifacts for the Teaching, Knowledge of Learners and Learning section of my portfolio because of how they focus on practices that encourage reading, writing, and collaboration. The first artifact is my book cluster from my 834 Advanced Children's Young Adult Literature class. I worked with a librarian at an elementary school to create this book cluster focused on the weather. I chose weather because it tied into several grade level curricula. I selected When Green Becomes Tomatoes by Julie Fagliano and illustrated by Julie Morstead as my core book. This poetry book encompasses all the seasons and, because I created the display in April, acted as a nod towards Poetry Month. This artifact meets the criteria for Standard 4 Teacher Knowledge of Learners and Learning, Knowledge 4.2. The librarian and information teacher knows strategies that promote leisure reading and models personal enjoyment of reading to promote creative expression. The eye-catching display I created, the various genres and grade levels, and tie-in with the curriculum made this a popular and successful promotion. When I returned to the library a few days after creating the display, several of the initial books had been checked out by students for leisure reading and had been replaced by the librarian with other weather-related books. Along with the physical display, I also created readers' response activities for each of the initial books in the display. I was so pleased to see that the books were getting checked out and super appreciative that the librarian was replacing them so that the display could stay up for a longer period of time. It was concrete proof that expert recommendations are a surefire way to get students to at least look at books that they might not otherwise have found. If I had been able to do this in my own library, I would have done a few things differently. I would have placed a display in a different location, perhaps on top of a lower bookshelf, so that I could have made it a little bigger and done more with the signage. I would have also emailed the teachers and informed them about the display, how it tied into their specific weather curriculum, and about the various readers' response activities I had created to go along with books appropriate for their grade levels. I would have offered to collaborate with them to either use the lessons in the library or work with them in their classroom to incorporate some of the lessons into their scheduled activities. The second artifact I selected was created from my 838 EdTech curriculum class. I produced an authentic writing assessment which focused on the 5 senses, figurative language, and an illustration or image to emphasize the idea of show don't tell in writing. This activity also gives students the opportunity to understand how to write a strong, focused paragraph. The writing assessment meets the criteria for Standard 4 Performance 4.6. The librarian and information teacher participates with reading specialists and other teachers in comprehensive literacy instruction, reading, writing, thinking, listening, and speaking. Student choice plays a role in this assignment because the student would get to choose from several simple sentences on which to elaborate. By providing the requirements of using the 5 senses, students would be guided on how to expand the writing and make it more complete. This activity would be most successful with the librarian and regular classroom teacher working together to introduce it and then expand upon it. To truly get the most out of the lesson, a librarian would work with a regular classroom teacher. Joint lessons that incorporate word choice, figurative language, and paragraph components should all be taught before students are asked to write their own paragraph. A librarian could find picture books that include examples of strong word choice depicting the 5 senses and books that focus on figurative language to share with the students. The teacher could focus on the mechanics of writing a paragraph. By working together, the librarian and teacher would best meet the criteria of this standard. Oftentimes, I think that students do not see the school librarian as a teacher. By finding ways to collaborate and work with classroom teachers, this perception can be altered. This is a benefit to not only the librarian, but to the school community as a whole.